Sarah Martinez smoothed her scrubs for the third time that shift, a nervous habit from her old life that she couldn't shake, even after 2 years of walking these antiseptic hallways instead of dark alleyways. And as she checked on the sleeping children in Ward C of Mercy General Hospital, she had no idea that tonight her two worlds would collide in a way that would change everyone forever, and the secret she'd been hiding since the day she traded her badge for a stethoscope would finally be revealed in the most unexpected and beautiful way imaginable. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar midnight song as Sarah made her rounds through the pediatric ward, her sneakers silent on the linoleum floors, checking vitals, adjusting blankets, whispering soft reassurances to restless children who woke from fever dreams. And in these quiet moments, she felt something she never felt during her 12 years as a detective, her sense of peace, of actually healing, instead of just picking up the pieces after everything had already shattered. Room 304 held little Emma Sutton, 6 years old, recovering from appendix surgery. Her blonde curls spread across the pillow like a halo, and in the chair beside her bed, her mother Rachel slept with her hand reaching through the rails, fingers intertwined with her daughter's, even in sleep. A portrait of love that made Sarah's chest tighten because she remembered another hospital, another child, another mother who didn't get to hold her daughter's hand anymore. Across the hall, in 3-7, Marcus Johnson, 8, with leukemia, drew pictures of superheroes on his sketchpad even at 1 in the morning because the medications made it hard to sleep. And when he saw Sarah peek in, he held up his latest drawing. A nurse with a cape and whispered, "That's you, Nurse Sarah. You're my hero." And she had to turn away quickly so he wouldn't see the tears in her eyes, because if only he knew that she'd spent over a decade chasing real criminals and never once felt as heroic as she did simply bringing him apple juice and sitting with him during the scary parts. Down in 312, the newest admission, a teenager named Sophie Chen, 16, who'd tried to end her own life 3 days ago, and now lay staring at the ceiling with empty eyes that Sarah recognized from her own mirror during the dark months after the incident, the one that made her leave the force, the one she couldn't talk about even in therapy, the one that still woke her up at 3 in the morning drenched in sweat and guilt. Sarah had joined the police force at 22, young and idealistic, believing she could make a difference, protect the innocent, bring justice to the broken places of the world. And for years, she was good at it too, making detective by 30, earning commendations, respect from her peers, fear from criminals who knew Detective Martinez didn't bluff and didn't quit. But then came the night that redefined everything. The night she had to choose between following protocol and saving a child's life. The night her split-second decision led to consequences that cleared her legally, but destroyed her emotionally. And 3 months later, she'd quietly resigned, enrolled in an accelerated nursing program, and rebuilt herself from scratch because she realized she didn't want to arrive after the damage was done anymore. She wanted to heal, to nurture, to be present for the vulnerable in their most fragile moments. The other nurses at Mercy General knew Sarah as the quiet one, the night shift regular who never complained, never gossiped, never talked about her past, who had an uncanny calmness in emergencies and could talk down an agitated patient with a skill that seemed almost supernatural. And they liked her, but didn't really know her, which was exactly how Sarah wanted it, because the past was a locked room, and she'd thrown away the key. It was 2:47 a.m. when Sarah heard the emergency room doors burst open, followed by shouting, and her entire body went rigid, every instinct from her former life firing at once, the hair on her arms standing up in recognition of danger before her conscious mind even processed what was happening. And she moved toward the nurse's station just as Linda, the ER nurse, came running down the hallway, eyes wide, face pale, whispering urgently, "There's a man. He's got a weapon. He's demanding medications." He pushed past security. Sarah would need to lock down the ward, but Sarah was already moving. not away from the danger, but toward it, and when Linda grabbed her arm, asking, "What are you doing?" Sarah's voice came out steady and calm, a voice Linda had never heard before. The voice of someone who'd faced down danger 100 times. "Get the children's doors closed. Keep everyone calm and quiet. Call the police, but tell them not to come in hot. And Linda, trust me. I've got this." Sarah walked down the corridor toward the elevator bank where she could hear a man's voice, ragged and desperate, shouting, "I just need the medicine. Please, my daughter needs it. I don't want to hurt anyone, but I can't let her die. Please." And when she rounded the corner, she saw him, mid-30s, unshaven, clothes wrinkled like he'd been wearing them for days, eyes red-rimmed from crying, or lack of sleep, or both. And yes, there was a weapon in his trembling hand. But Sarah's trained eyes saw everything else too: the hospital bracelet on his wrist, the Sesame Street Band-Aid on his knuckle, the photo clutched in his other hand, the absolute terror and desperation radiating from every line of his body. This wasn't a criminal. This was a father at the end of his rope. The 2 security guards were backed against the wall, hands raised, and Sarah stepped forward calmly, her hands visible and open, her voice gentle but firm. "Hey, I'm Sarah. I'm a nurse on this floor. And I can see you're scared. I can see you're here because you love someone. So let's talk about it, okay? What's your daughter's name?" The man's weapon hand shook as he turned to face her, tears streaming down his face, and he choked out, "Lily. Her name is Lily. She's 4. She has cystic fibrosis, and the pharmacy won't fill her prescription because our insurance lapsed, and I lost my job, and I called everyone. I begged. I sold everything we had, but it's $8,000, and she needs it now. She can't breathe right. And I won't watch my baby suffer when the medicine is right here in this building." And Sarah took another small step forward, her entire demeanor radiating calm understanding, and she said, "I hear you. I believe you. And we're going to help Lily. I promise you that. But first, I need you to help me understand. Show me her picture." The man's face crumpled, and he lowered the weapon slightly, holding out the crumpled photograph with a shaking hand. And Sarah stepped close enough to see it: a tiny girl with dark curls and huge brown eyes, wearing a princess costume, smiling at the camera with pure joy. And Sarah felt her heart crack because she saw another little girl's face superimposed over Lily's. A girl from 3 years ago, a girl she couldn't save. And she said softly, "She's beautiful. She has your eyes, and you're right. She needs her medicine, but she also needs her daddy to come home safe. And right now, we're going to make both those things happen." Sarah's voice dropped into a tone she hadn't used in years, thenegotiatorvoice.com, and authoritative. "My name is Sarah Martinez, and before I became a nurse, I was a police detective for 12 years. So I know how this looks from every angle, and I'm telling you that there's a way through this where Lily gets her medicine and gets to keep her father. But you have to trust me right now, okay?" The man's eyes widened in shock, the weapon wavering, and he whispered, "You're a cop." And Sarah shook her head. I'm not anymore. I'm a nurse. And right now I'm standing here as someone who understands what it's like to be desperate, to feel like the system failed you. To love someone so much, you'd do anything. I get it, but I'm also someone who knows that there are always options we can't see when we're in the panic. And I'm asking you, parent to parent, human to human, give me 15 minutes to find those options before we do something that can't be undone. Behind her, she could hear the elevator ding, and she held up a hand without turning around, knowing it was probably the police response team. And she called out firmly, "This is Sarah Martinez, formerly Detective Martinez, badge number 2847. I am managing this situation, requesting you hold position and give me space to de-escalate." And she heard a familiar voice, her old partner Tony, whisper, "Martinez, Sarah." But she kept her eyes locked on the desperate father in front of her. "What's your name?" she asked gently. and the man swallowed hard and said, "David." David Chen, and Sarah's mind made the connection instantly. Sophie Chen in room 312. The 16-year-old who'd attempted suicide, and she said very carefully, "David, is Sophie your daughter too?" And watched his face shatter completely as he nodded, the weapon drooping toward the floor as his knees buckled, and he sobbed, "I'm failing everyone. Sophie's in the psychiatric unit because she said I care more about Lily than her. And maybe she's right, because I can't stop. I can't focus on anything except keeping Lily alive. And I've lost my wife, my job, my house. Everything's gone. And I don't know how to do this anymore. I don't know how to save everyone. I don't even know how to save myself." Sarah closed the distance between them in 2 quick steps, her hand gently covering his, lowering the weapon to the ground between them, and she guided him to sit down right there on the floor, sitting beside him like they were 2 people on a park bench instead of in a hospital corridor at 3 in the morning with armed police 30 feet away. And she said, "David, I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone here. 3 years ago, I was the lead detective on a case involving a kidnapped child, and I tracked down where she was being held. But when I got there, the situation was complicated, and I had to make a choice between waiting for backup like protocol demanded, or going in alone because I could hear her crying. And I went in, and I got her out, but the kidnapper got away because I prioritized her life over the arrest. And he went on to hurt someone else 6 months later, and even though the department cleared me, even though the therapists told me I made the right call, I couldn't carry that weight anymore. I couldn't keep making impossible choices, so I left, and I became a nurse because I needed to be in a place where my job was just to care, just to heal. No moral calculations, no impossible choices. But David, what I learned is that the impossible choices don't stop, they just change shape. And tonight, I'm choosing to believe that you're not a criminal. You're a desperate father, and that Sophie upstairs isn't just a suicide attempt. She's a girl who needs her dad, and Lily isn't just a prescription cost. She's a little girl who needs both her father and her medicine." David was crying so hard, he was shaking, and he whispered, "I'm so tired. I'm so scared. I don't know what to do." And Sarah put her arm around his shoulders and said, "I know, but you're not alone anymore. We're going to figure this out together, okay?" She looked up at the security guards, and at Tony, who had stepped into view with 3 other officers, all with weapons lowered, all watching the scene with a mixture of confusion and awe. And she said, "Tony, I need you to do something for me. I need you to contact Social Services Emergency Fund. I need you to get a pharmaceutical company rep on the phone. I need you to wake up the hospital administrator and tell them, we have a father with 2 daughters in crisis, and we're going to solve this tonight. All of it. And I need you to trust me, the way you did when I wore the badge." Tony nodded slowly and said, "You got it, Martinez, but Sarah, it's good to see you. Even like this." And she smiled sadly and nodded, then turned back to David. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with me. We're going to go upstairs to see Sophie, and you're going to tell her that you love her, that you see her, that she matters just as much as Lily. And while we're doing that, these people are going to work on getting Lily's medicine, because this hospital has emergency funds, compassionate use programs, and pharmaceutical company assistance programs that you probably didn't know about, because when you're drowning, you can't see the lifelines, but I see them, and we're going to grab every single one over the next hour." Sarah orchestrated a miracle through sheer force of will and knowledge of systems from both her police work and her nursing. She got Tony to contact a detective who specialized in social services connections. She got the on-call hospital administrator to approve emergency pharmaceutical assistance. She got David's case in front of a charity organization that helped families of chronically ill children. And while that was happening, she walked David up to Sophie's room, where the teenager was still awake, staring at the ceiling. And when David walked in, Sophie's face went through a journey of emotions: shock, anger, fear, confusion, and David collapsed beside her bed and said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I almost did something terrible tonight because I was so focused on saving Lily that I forgot I was losing you. And Sophie, baby, I can't lose you. You're my heart just as much as she is. And I've been so scared and so tired that I stopped seeing what my fear was doing to you. But I see you now. I'm here now. And I'm going to do better. I'm going to get help. We're going to get through this together." Sophie started crying, and Sarah quietly stepped out to give them privacy. And she found herself face to face with Rachel Sutton, Emma's mother, from room 304, who'd woken up and heard the commotion and come out. And Rachel whispered, "You're a police officer?" And Sarah shook her head. "I was. Not anymore. Now I'm just a nurse who had some extra training for a difficult situation." But Rachel grabbed her hand and said, "My husband's a police officer, and I know that kind of calm doesn't come from nursing school. You saved lives tonight, maybe more than you know. Emma talks about you all the time. She says you're the nicest nurse. And I just want you to know that whatever brought you here, whatever made you leave that life for this one, I'm grateful, because you're exactly where you're supposed to be." By 5 a.m., as the first light started creeping through the windows, Lily Chen's medication had been secured through a combination of Hospital Assistance Fund, pharmaceutical company, compassionate use program, and an emergency grant from a non-profit organization. David had been evaluated by the hospital psychiatrist and enrolled in a crisis counseling program rather than arrested because Sarah and Tony had advocated fiercely for treatment over incarceration. Sophie had agreed to continue her psychiatric treatment with the addition of family therapy sessions, and Sarah had finally sat down at the nurse's station, exhausted, her secret revealed to her colleagues, who now looked at her with new eyes. And Linda came over and said, "So, former detective, huh? Guess that explains why you're so good at handling difficult patients in emergency situations. And Sarah, I don't know why you left that life, but I'm really glad you're here." When Sarah's shift ended at 7 a.m., she walked out to the parking lot expecting to just go home and collapse, but Tony was waiting by her car, and he said, "12 years we were partners, and then you just vanished. Left a resignation letter and disappeared. And I looked for you, but you didn't want to be found. And I respected that. But Sarah, I need you to know that case. The one that made you leave the little girl you saved. Emma Rodriguez. She's 17 now. She's thriving. She's planning to become a social worker to help other kids in crisis. And the man who got away, we caught him 2 years ago. He's in prison for life. And what happened wasn't your fault. You saved a life. You did exactly what you were supposed to do." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face, years of guilt and shame finally cracking open. And she whispered, "But I broke protocol. I put the case at risk." And Tony shook his head. "You put the child first. And that's why you were the best detective I ever worked with. And it's probably why you're an amazing nurse now. Because you see people, not cases, not problems, but actual human beings worth saving. And what you did tonight, talking down a desperate father, getting his whole family help, preventing that's who you've always been, badge or no badge." Sarah drove home as the sun rose over the city, and for the first time in 3 years, she felt like the two halves of her life, Detective Martinez and Nurse Sir, weren't in conflict anymore. They were just different expressions of the same calling, the same desire to protect and heal and stand between people and the worst moments of their lives. The next week, David Chen sent a letter to the hospital that got posted on the staff bulletin board, describing how a nurse had saved his life and his family in one impossible night. How his daughters were both getting the help they needed, how he'd found a new job through a program for parents of special needs children, and how he'd learned that asking for help wasn't weakness, but wisdom, and that sometimes angels wear scrubs instead of wings. Sarah kept that letter in her locker, and on the hard nights, when she questioned her choices, her career change, her purpose. She'd read it and remember that every life contains multitudes. Every ending is also a beginning, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not to hide who you were, but to integrate it into who you're becoming. 6 months later, Sophie Chen came back to the hospital, not as a patient, but as a volunteer in the pediatric ward. And she sought out Sarah specifically and said, "I don't know exactly what happened that night. My dad won't tell me all of it, but I know you saved him, saved us. And I want to learn how to do that too, how to be there for people in their darkest moments, how to see past the crisis to the person inside." And Sarah hugged her and whispered, "You're already doing it, just by being here, just by choosing to transform your pain into purpose." Marcus Johnson, the 8-year-old with leukemia, went into remission and brought Sarah a drawing before he was discharged. Showed a nurse with a superhero cape, but this time she also had a badge pinned to her chest, and across the top he'd written in careful letters, "True heroes don't need to choose, they just need to care." And Sarah framed it and hung it in her apartment. A reminder that children sometimes see the truth more clearly than adults ever can. Emma Sutton recovered fully from her surgery, and every year on the anniversary, her mother Rachel brought cookies to the night shift staff with a special batch for Sarah, and they became friends. And eventually Sarah attended Emma's dance recitals and birthday parties, and Rachel's husband, Officer John Sutton, became someone Sarah could talk to about the strange journey from law enforcement to healthcare. And slowly, her new life filled with connections instead of secrets, with belonging instead of hiding. The hospital administrator, after learning about Sarah's background, asked her to develop a training program for hospital staff on de-escalation techniques and crisis management. And Sarah found herself teaching seminars, sharing her knowledge from both worlds, helping nurses and security guards, and even doctors understand how to read situations, calm aggression, see the human beneath the crisis. And she discovered she was good at this too. This bridge building between her past expertise and her present calling. On the 1-year anniversary of that night, Sarah was back on shift in the pediatric ward when Tony showed up again, but this time he was in civilian clothes, holding a gift bag. And he said, "I'm retiring next month, 25 years on the force. And I've been thinking about what's next. And I was wondering, do you think a old cop could become a decent nurse? Because watching you that night, seeing how you used everything you learned in one career to be better at another, it made me realize that helping people doesn't have to end when the badge gets turned in." And Sarah smiled through tears and said, "I think you'd be amazing, and I'll help you every step of the way." 2 years after the incident, Sarah received an invitation to speak at the police academy graduation, and she almost declined, afraid of facing that world again. But something made her say yes, and she stood before a room full of young officers with shining badges and idealistic eyes, and she told them the truth. Some of you will do this job for 40 years and retire with honor, and some of you will leave after 5 years because it breaks something in you that can't be fixed. And some of you, like me, will discover that the calling to serve is bigger than any single career. And wherever you end up, whatever path you take, the measure of your success isn't the arrests or the commendations, it's the lives you touch, the people you see as human beings worthy of dignity, even in their worst moments. And if you remember nothing else from today, remember, this being a protector isn't about the uniform you wear. It's about the heart you bring to every encounter, every crisis, every impossible choice. Sarah Martinez continued working night shifts at Mercy General Hospital, and her colleagues still called her just Sarah, but now they knew that the calm in her voice came from years of facing danger, that her skill at de-escalation was trained in hostage negotiations, that her ability to see past behavior to underlying need was honed in interrogation rooms and crime scenes, and she was no longer hiding 2 separate lives, but living one integrated truth, that whether she wore a badge or scrubs, carried a weapon, or a stethoscope, worked in darkness or in healing light. She was always the same person, someone who stood between people and their worst moments and said, "I see you. I'm here, and we're going to get through this together." And in the end, that was the only identity that truly mattered, the only role that defined her, the only truth that would be written on her heart. Long after the titles faded, she was a guardian of the vulnerable, a voice for the desperate, a light in the darkest hours. And some callings transcend careers, some purposes survive every transformation, and the highest form of service is simply to see another's humanity and refuse to let them face their darkness alone.